Good day, guys. It's great to be here with you again. We are looking at our social media analysis for the WUFT brand for Q4 2015. This is the manager's report. Great to be here again. Thanks for the opportunity as we go through some of our analyses for October, November, and December of 2015. Let's have a look at our agenda today. We're going to be looking at the fan analysis first, followed by visibility, then of course our post analysis and our engagement analysis. Coming out of that, we'll then have some recommendations for you, as well as the way forward in making 2016 a success for WUFT. In terms of the overview, what we generally try to get across is the importance of sort of sharing the brand's performance across all of your social channels. So of course that'll be Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook in this instance. So we'll be looking at those three channels. Generally for this Q4 report, we will be sort of looking at how the three channels compare with each other. And then we'll also do a sampling of how, say, just Twitter would perform against fans and visibility, or Facebook or Instagram. But on the most part, we're looking at all three channels cohesively. But some important questions to ask as we do these analyses would be, does the brand require all selected channels? So you're on three channels right now. Do you want to cut that down to maybe two, or does each channel have a specific level of importance for the brand? The short answer in this case would be yes. All three channels are needed, and you might even want to expand into a fourth. Other questions, is focus being placed on each channel enough? Does it seem maybe lopsided at times? It's sort of something to look at, because you're going to see as we go through that there is emphasis on one channel over the other two, and that could be a bit of a danger, a bit of a red flag going forward. Do the channels complement each other and tie into each other? Are we using sound strategies to increase engagement? And why some channels may be performing better than others? We'll look at that as well. So in this report, as the agenda mentioned, we'll be looking at the analysis of fans, visibility, posts, and engagement. We're looking at specifically this time at Q4 2015, and we'll be repeating a similar process, hopefully, with Q1 2016. But more deeper than that in terms of fans and visibility, posts and engagement, we'll be looking at the results of likes, reach and impressions in the case of visibility, post frequency in terms of posts, and overall total engagement, which can include shares, comments, and clicks. And then coming out of this data, we'll then suggest some actionable recommendations for WUFT to take forward into 2016. Let's start with fans in terms of page level likes, and we're going to be using Facebook as a channel for this one. In terms of Q4, we're looking at October, November, and December. So we're focusing on this portion of the chart. You see a steady increase, but slow, from October going into November, and then the latter half of November increasing exponentially into December. And there are of course reasons for that. In terms of how we tally it at the end of each of the 5 months, total fan count at that time is recorded and compared with the following month. So that's what that line graph was basically showing us. Very importantly, the results show a sharp increase in Q4, which is great, from just under 1900 in October to just over 2700 in December, at the end of the quarter. Specific activity within this period is responsible for this spike in fan growth, especially related to the presidential address, which created a lot of hype. And we're going to actually talk about how a political angle can actually help increase our engagement overall for the brand, as well as the infamous unwanted guest post, which was kind of a fun accident, which we may need to repeat to get those sorts of results again, because we see the success factor in that. Moving on to visibility, we're looking at impressions, and in this case the channel is Twitter. We're looking at the latter half of this line graph, and we're seeing between October and December we actually have a decline occurring, and it's been mentioned, and we'll see in more detail, that Twitter seems to have almost been ignored for Q4. And that's something we need to take a look at. Twitter's performance did not do well, and it has a lot to do with post frequency, which we'll get into in a bit. So in terms of impressions for Twitter, again, it's the total number of impressions recorded for each month compared across all months. We're looking at the last 3 for Q4, October to December. But we do take note in Q4 that the highest rates were in October and November, yet the lowest was in December. We tie in the December drop off to sort of a winding down of the year, and admin sort of winding up and heading out on vacation, and just things becoming quieter at that point. But there seems to be a direct correlation between the number of brand generated tweets and impressions, with the exception of November and December, where they actually contrast each other. So Twitter is, the performance there is a bit lopsided in a way, but it has a lot to do, I think, with dedication from human resources on the actual Twitter channel. So the Twitter was sort of Twitter against, say, Facebook was sort of a paradox in Q4. And in terms of reach, we're looking at Facebook for this, October, November, December. We have that great sort of steep increase between October and November, which is, of course, directly correlated to likes and other engagement that we saw in an earlier chart, for the very same reasons. So the low for Q4 occurred in October at 15,000, and that equated to over 200% less than the quarter's peak reach. And of course, we saw the exciting performance in November at 46,000, so that's a vast difference of 200%. The month of December experienced a decline due to the usual seasonal nature that I explained has occurred with Twitter. Similar reasons there could have attributed to the sort of slowing down and waning of excitement in the month of December. Then we had a look at post frequency, and that'll be the number of brand generated posts in this instance. In this case, we're looking at all 3 channels, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and we're looking again at Q4, October, November and December. This chart actually includes sort of a pull-out of the aggregated data, so we can sort of hone in on just these areas for Q4 for post-frequency. We see that, of course, Facebook completely outperforms the other 2 channels. So we have to wonder what was going on in here for Twitter and Instagram. It concerns us, because you're talking 3 months with a very low frequency of posts, and then with Facebook a much higher frequency, and this is actually where it should be, more in the 106 region in this area. But you want to look at that to carry across all 3 channels, not just Facebook. So we have that high of 106. Looking at our totals, 253 brand generated posts against a mere 37 for Instagram and 36 for Twitter, which is a vast difference, and we can look at percentages in our next slide. So as we discussed at first glance, there's some immediately obvious observations there. And in November, for instance, we had a high of 132 posts. Of that 132, 106 for Facebook. So what happened with the other 2 channels again? That represents an 80%, over 80% of total posts across all 3 channels was attached to Facebook. So it's just 20% shared between Instagram and Twitter. and that of course is a concern. So for this period, WFT seems to be placing far more emphasis on Facebook, but this strategy is only yielding mediocre engagement results, with an average of 26 engagement encounters across the 3-month period, which is quite low. Actually, it'd be good to point out here that Instagram actually had a much higher level of engagement. So though Instagram had very few posts, and we'll talk about this in the recommendations, it generated a very high engagement rate as opposed to Facebook. So it means that those posts on Instagram are actually more engaging. Continuing with engagement, we're looking at total likes, shares, comments and clicks across all 3 channels for Q. Again, the trend continues. Facebook, very high levels of engagement, especially in November, for the reasons, and totals here are very attractive. Instagram, again, considering the post frequency was quite low, Instagram pulled in quite engagement. So this is good to note. We're actually doing something right with Instagram in terms of the content type, because it is creating that level of engagement that we're looking for. So we've seen the recommendations again, that could you imagine what could happen if we just increased post frequency for Instagram? What sort of figures we'll be looking at here for Q1 2016? It'll be quite amazing. And then of course the dwindling and lagging Twitter results across the board. Again, let's say. So across all three channels, there's a direct correlation between likes and overall across the channels and the months, and we discussed what was done right with Instagram in terms of engagement, what was done right in terms of post frequency for Facebook, and then what's not so right with Twitter, as we've seen before. Instagram's percentage declines for engagement match almost perfectly to its percent changes for likes, due to the fact that likes contributed to over 95% of total engagement across the board. In the case of Facebook, though similar fluctuations existed, the quantum of engagement encounters far outweighed Facebook likes. So that was something else that was interesting. This means that engagement beyond likes, such as comments, shares, and non-brand posts, proved to be the success story for WFT in 2015. So we need to actually leverage that. In the month of November, that infamous and exciting month for us, which we need to keep on repeating, total engagement was a whopping 5,155% higher than the sole measurement of likes. This speaks volumes for some of the positive attributes of the brand's Facebook management, assuming the data provided is accurate. Now remember, we're looking at a lot of emphasis on Facebook in terms of man hours spent on posts for Facebook, so that needs to be spread across, and we're going to recommend the percentage that should be spread across in the recommendations. So let's start with that. Recommendation 1, increase posts as follows. We're looking at 4 per day for Twitter and 2 per day via Instagram, and we'll explain why those numbers are recommended in our analogous data in one of the final slides. But basically 2 of the 3 channels are underutilized. That's Twitter and Instagram. There are obvious gaps that we need to look at. The quantity of posts via Facebook are a whopping 253 over the 3-month period, as opposed to 37 and 36 over the same period for Instagram and Twitter. So that's something we want to look at. Let's sort of spread the resources and dedicate more time on Twitter and Instagram to achieve some more positive results in 2016. Another recommendation we're looking at, to increase brand fans and followers by 25% each semester. So this one is a bit unorthodox. It's actually looking at traditional means of attraction. So instead of wooing students at the undergrad and grad levels via online mechanisms, we're looking at more traditional ways to do that. harder to measure, but some obvious ways to via new student orientation, an introductory assignment, and of course this applies more to journalism students, of course, for that type of study. But I mean, just think about it, students in dorm rooms, bulletin boards, those sort of social and team effort, why not sort of mesh this into the way we do things? It's a traditional way we do it. And let's start from home and then branch out. So I think we've branched out first, and we're not looking at what's right at our front door. Looking at another recommendation, let's realign social media resources for more effective results by reducing the time spent administering Facebook by 30%, so this makes it quantifiable, and recommitting that 30% to Twitter and Instagram. So it's not taking away from what we're doing with Facebook too much. It's taking away a percentage and recommitting that to the other two channels. I see it as us working hard but not smart, as the saying goes. Earlier, could you imagine what results we could get out of Instagram by just increasing 37 posts across 3 months to 180? It doesn't even need to be 180, it could be 100. And we see those results coming in once the type of post to Instagram is maintained, because obviously the type of posts that we're posting now is creating a success. And again, Twitter, a bit of a disaster that we need to fix immediately. But again, that 1,000% increase seems unattainable on the surface, but with some resources coming off of Facebook and geared towards the current underdogs, as I call them, Twitter and Instagram, for WUFT, for this period of study, I think this is absolutely achievable. Yeah, so let's look at that for 2016. And our fourth recommendation and final one for Q4, there was a bit of a roller coaster ride going from October to November to December, especially for two of the channels. We want to maintain a sort of consistency from month to month. I'm calling it rolling hills as opposed to roller coaster or plateau. Plateau is generally a negative word. But I mean a sort of an equilibrium, more consistency, more predictability. I think if we show quantity of posts, we will be able to keep our results a little bit more predictable and maintain the level that we need. And again, these are some inconsistencies that we saw in Q4. And an example of that roller coaster ride would be October starting with 127, then November 206, and closing off at 161 in December. How do we get a better equilibrium there? So, fluctuations are to be expected, but let's try and make it more predictable and more planned, more strategically planned, right? I use politics as an excellent example. We see what's happening in the US elections, and it happens everywhere, even in Trinidad and Tobago. When it comes to politics, engagement is so high. People are passionate, people get involved, it can get tricky and scary at times, but it sort of engenders that level of engagement and involvement from people. And the US elections are coming up. There's some interesting candidates, love them or hate them, but it's loads of attention, and WUFT can totally capitalize on that, especially during this period. This can be sort of a launch pad for WUFT by using the politics and elections as a mechanism to garner that support and excitement and interest. So some of our recommendations, of course, come from established case studies, one of them being from Huffington Post, in terms of what politics and elections can do in social media. It's very apparent. I mean, there's loads of information out there that says, a lot of people say don't discuss politics and religion in a group, but for social media, you better believe it, bring in the politics. Loads of excitement, and it's been seen from Obama's first election. It's being seen now. Why not piggyback on that? So have a look at that Huffington Post link, And then going into the post frequency, which we thought was important and lagging in Twitter and Instagram. The general guide for posting daily in terms of Facebook would be 1 or 2 posts per day during the week and once per day on weekends. Twitter is a little more fluid. Twitter sort of refreshes so often, so the frequency needs to be higher. They're looking at 8 to 12 times per day. We're recommending 4 to start with for WUFT, because right now it's at 0 to 1. So let's move it up to 4, and then maybe by end of 2016 we can look at the 8 to 12 times for Twitter. And just once per day on Instagram, we're recommending 2, because of what we've seen with engagement and success with Instagram for WUFT. So once or twice per day is good, and that comes from eClincher. Have a look at that link. I broke the rule here for slide text. Generally, in a PowerPoint, you want to keep slides, the text within each slide down to a minimum and sort of explain everything. But I wanted you to walk away with an actual resource within the PowerPoint, so that I got more detailed and informational in each slide, so that you can have a sort of resource to refer back to with a lot of detail. So the slides are, kind of heavy, but I wanted you to walk away with some information. And in conclusion, these are just snapshots of Q4 2015, but even though it's a snapshot for a specific quarter, we did pull some trends and that sort of recur. And it's a small segment, but you can sort of do things from it and make actionable recommendations out of it for an entire year, even though it's just Q4. But of course, we'll be back at you again end of Q1 2016, see how things are going. And we'd like to thank you so much for this opportunity.